Hey everybody, it's CJ. And for a YouTube channel that's ostensibly supposed to be about comic books and goings on with comic books and everything, I haven't really talked very much about comic books, so today seems like it's a pretty good opportunity to rectify that. Basically, what I want to do is talk about The Shadow, 1941, Hitler's Astrologer. And reason for that is because I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about Hitler's Astrologer very much. And I guess number two, I'm a Shadow fan from way back, and this character has meant so much to me for so long that I mean, because to me it seems almost like it seems almost criminally negligent that this character hasn't gotten more attention and more praise and more adulation and God knows more fans than he's actually gotten over the years. Now, it is my understanding that the Shadow actually has a pretty robust fan base, but it's a particular type of fan. And I mean, to me, the sad thing about all of this is that the Shadow truly is everything that Batman pretends to be. And the sheer amount of ideas and concepts and just stuff that Bob Kane, Bill Finger, and others ripped off from the Shadow to create Batman. I mean, for me, it's unassailable that at least in Batman's launch, in his beginnings, it is accurate to call Batman pretty much a ripoff of the Shadow. I don't think that's inaccurate at all. But I don't want. I really don't care to get too much into that. Razor Fist, the Rageaholic, he did a much better job, I think, of articulating that position and justifying it. He did a much better job than I'm probably going to be able to do. So just track down his video about that. You'll see what I'm talking about. But anyway, to actually get into this, this is a pretty historically important milestone in the Shadow's history. Not just because this volume was drawn by Mike Kaluta, although that is of historical importance all by itself. But excuse me, I don't know what's going on with my throat today. I've just had throat problems. But anyway, the one of the things that stands out in the art, just as you flip through this thing, is if you're familiar with Mike Kaluta's shadow work from the 1970s. What you see here is a pretty substantial departure from the look and feel and style of the Shadow comics that DC published back in the 1970s. Whereas the 1970s stuff, Mike Kaluta had a very fluid type of line style. What you see here in Hitler's Astrologer, maybe it's just the fact that Russ Heath is the inker, but what you see here in Hitler's Astrologer is this almost looks, you can see just a much cleaner line. It almost looks kind of like a wood carving. It's just different from a lot of Kaluta's work with the shadow. So there's that. The other thing is one of the things that you can do with the shadow that it's harder. Okay, it's a little bit harder to do with other characters. Is you can put real life historical figures and events and places into shadow stories in a way that it's a lot harder to do with, say, Superman. It's a lot harder to do that with a character like Superman, who's supposed to exist kind of perpetually in the modern day. Whereas the Shadow, being as he's a product, very much a creature of the 1930s and 40s, and even somewhat into the 50s, I'd say. You can play with that a little bit more, and put him, and you can basically have boots on the ground with IRL history when it comes to the Shadow a lot easier than you can a lot of other characters. And obviously, just the title of Hitler's Astrologer should basically tell you who the big bad of this story is. And I don't want to get too far into a spoiler territory with this volume. It really is worth reading. But basically, obviously, it's going to be Nazi Germany. And the basically the I'm not sure. I'm really not sure how historically accurate some of this stuff is. All this goings on with Hitler and Goebbels and what's his name, Himmler, their astrology or their beliefs in astrology, their recruiting of astrologers and all that stuff. I'm not really sure how historically accurate that is. It makes for a great story, don't get me wrong, but I really don't think that's actually got a historical pedigree behind it. Nevertheless, like I say, it does make for an entertaining story, and basically, the Shadow knows, and he also knows that Germany is basically they are perched on the edge of victory in World War II. Basically, this takes place in the spring of 1941, and it is true that Germany they were basically poised to win at that time. And so the Shadow's play here is to succor Nazi Germany into launching their invasion of the Soviet Union at virtually the worst possible time. And in so doing, that creates a domino effect that will lead to the defeat of Nazi Germany, which is more or less what happened. I mean, it's like anything with history. It's not really so cut and dried, but it's like at the same time, for as many victories as Nazi Germany was scoring in 1941, for in fact, for that matter, for practically all of 1941, it's like the invasion of the Soviet Union started off great, but that was really the first in kind of a chain reaction of things that led to the defeat of Nazi Germany. And basically, this story positions the Shadow as sort of the catalyst for all that. And it may just be that I've got Nazi fatigue. Possibly it owes back to me being just kind of fed up with being called a Nazi for all these years by comic book pros. But I'm just kind of getting to the point where I'm a little bit fed up with Nazis or Nazi analogs as the villain of every story. But in any case, obviously this volume was published back in the 80s, long before any of that was really a problem. And so as a result, what you have is a story that is, historically speaking, it is plausible. Again, I question yeah, some of the historical facts that are presented in this story. I really don't think are actually true. Vis-a-vis all of the astrology bullshit and all that stuff. I really don't think that's actually true. But nevertheless, it's, I guess, true-ish, and it's persuasive enough that you can at least buy into the story and just really enjoy it. And yeah, this is actually page 8 that I'm looking at right here. I don't think I want to go too much further beyond this, aside from just a quick, or maybe a few other pages. I mean, my God, just look at this art. It's, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this is Mike Kaluta at his peak. I mean, maybe it is. But, I mean, certainly I've never seen Mike Kaluta's art look quite this good before. And overall, this is just an amazingly good story. It's got this menacing mystery atmosphere that honestly it should be an element of every Shadow story. This sort of looming darkness that's ever in the background, and of course, actually in this case, it may actually literally be in the background. I mean, look at this panel right here. that could plausibly be the shadow watching over everything that's happening here. And I don't know, it's just it's got the atmosphere that I look for in shadow stories. This should be on anybody's essential shadow story list. Uh, with whatever your favorite pulps are, or whatever your favorite episodes of the radio show might be, or whatever your favorite comics might be, this deserves a spot, at least in your top 10. I would go so far as to say your top 5, but because certainly it is in my top 5. This is a comic book that was made by people who give a damn. Now, I'm familiar with the arguments that Denny O'Neil, in his own way and in his own time, he was as much of a uh, he was as much of an SJW as anyone else. And I understand those arguments. I'm familiar with those arguments, but it's not apparent in a lot of Denny O'Neil's work, how much of a lefty he actually was. And I don't know. Just overall, I really enjoy this. So anyway, this is definitely a recommend. I highly recommend you pick this up. You can actually get it for pretty cheap on Comixology, which is obviously where I got it. And yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? No, I take it back. There is one final page I want to show you, just to kind of tell you how much I love, friggin' love this art. I don't know what's going on with the little scroller here, but anyway, yeah, here we go. The very last page. And honestly, this doesn't give away a ton about the story, but you can. Mostly, what I want to do is just kind of focus on the. Uh, what is this supposed to be? Like a phoenix, I think, or an eagle or condor or whatever the hell the Nazi bird is supposed to be. But just look at this. It's engulfed in flames. And what I think we're supposed to infer from this is kind of like a preview of basically of the Battle of Berlin. It's the fall of Nazi Germany, and it's basically previewing all of this. Showing what happens after the end of this story, as if you don't know. And I don't know. It's just look at the atmosphere of this. Then the hatching, the lines, the shadow, the colors. This is everything that makes comics great. This is, as I say, this comic book, it was made by people. I mean, yes, they made it because they want to sell a comic book, and I get that. But it's like at the same time, this really was made for love of the game. And as a result, what you have is a story that's highly enjoyable, highly readable, and particularly original. And I think it did a lot to restore a lot of the dignity that the Shadow had lost at DC following the Howard Chaykin miniseries, which maybe it wasn't all that wonderful, the Howard Chaykin miniseries, Shadow miniseries. But that Shadow ongoing series by Kyle Baker that spun out of the Howard Chaykin Shadow miniseries published by DC, god awful really does seem like the best descriptor for that. And what we have here, the cover says Dynamite, but this was originally published by Marvel. This is a story that did a lot to restore the Shadow's dignity and sense of mystery and menace, and his interaction, like I say, with IRL history. This is this Shadow story is good on its own merits, but it's also good from the standpoint of what it seems to be a reaction to what preceded it. That just makes it all so much better for me. So like I say, definitely recommend. Definitely you want to check this out. I mean, the art alone is, I think that makes it worthwhile. So anyway, and so that's that. Please comment, like, subscribe, and share. Doing those things really helps me out. Also, I'm on Twitter at Cole Loves Comics.